The major elections held yesterday included gubernatorial races in Virginia and New Jersey, New York City's mayoral election, and significant ballot initiatives, such as California's Proposition 50. Democrats emerged as the winners in all the major contests, sweeping key races and strengthening their position ahead of the 2026 midterms. Joining us now to discuss is legal analyst and civil rights attorney Bobbie Anne Cox and NTD News contributor and the host of the Can We Please Talk podcast, Mike Leon. Good to have you both with us today. Let's start with a look at the Democratic Party itself and where it's at today. Yesterday's elections, of course, were by and large in Democratic strongholds, so those wins were expected, especially in an off year. Yet, looking at Zohran Mamdani specifically in his campaign, it kind of struck a different tone to the moderate messaging of recent years for that party. Starting off with you, Mike, what, if anything, does his campaign and win indicate about the Democratic Party today?
Well, good to see you ladies on this Wednesday afternoon. Well, I think it says a couple of things. First, my hope is that Democrats copy the blueprint of what he did. The march from Fort Tryon all the way down to Lower Manhattan, knocking on doors, doing things that a typical candidate, you would see them do at a local race, right? Like they'd be standing outside of the grocery store and handing out flyers. He did all of this grassroots campaigning, and Democrats have been dying to have somebody energize the party like that. And then here comes this person, and they're like, well, not that way, which is so funny to see with the endorsements, the tepid endorsements from the likes of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. So what does it say about the party overall? I'll echo something that Congressman Seth Moulton, who's a friend of mine who's been on my show and now running for Senate in Massachusetts, said, which is that it's a mixed bag, right? You get the Abigail Spanbergers, who are moderate Democrats that can win a gubernatorial race. You get the Mikey Sherrills, who served in this nation's, army. And then you get the Zohran Mamdanis, who are Democratic socialists that have some ideas that some think maybe are crazy, maybe they're far-fetched, but, it's a shot in the dark and it's a try, but he can mobilize voters and energize the base. And it's a mixed bag. And that's what I think was the takeaway last night, the through line in terms of the 2025 elections for Democrats.
And strategists, of course, are really starting to unpick what unfolded last night, starting to reflect on Mamdani's win, asking what's causing people to choose a socialist platform. Bobbie Anne, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the voters in New York City that turned out in large numbers are a mixed bag, as Mike said. But here's what the problem is. I think the messaging was that, hey, I'm going to improve New York City by making everything more, quote unquote, affordable. So what Mamdani has been saying on his campaign trail is he's going to make it more affordable, which is something that's very enticing to many New Yorkers, right? But how is he going to do that? He's not going to do that by lowering taxes and putting more money in your pocket. He has been very open about how he's going to do that. For example, providing free buses, which is something he cannot do, by the way. The MTA controls the bus system in New York City, and that is controlled by the New York State Legislature, not by the not by the mayor of New York City. He says he's going to give free childcare. He's going to freeze the rent so that landlords can't increase rent. He's going to ban private property so that you don't own anything. He's going to seize the means of production. These are all things that are really beyond socialism. They really are more Marxist in nature. So people were not really paying attention to the details, but they liked the overall idea that he has been promoting, which is, more affordable. And I think that's why he won.
And affordability was a key issue across many of the elections yesterday. But strategists are also kind of asking, why is it that young people did not mind this label of socialism and even want to vote for it? We'll start with you, Mike.
Yeah, well, I'll piggyback on something Bobbie Anne said. So first off, there's a couple things. And you know this, Steph. I'm a lifelong New York kid. I grew up 20 blocks away from Bronx Science High School, where Zohran went to high school. So New York City runs through my blood. But I don't live in New York anymore, right? I haven't for the last 2 years. Why? Because the apartment I lived in during the COVID pandemic, when New York was trying to get people back in under de Blasio with the rent freezes and the 15 to 18 month leases, that unit is now $2,500 more. For a family of four, it's completely unaffordable. No mayor is going to change that. Not Zohran Mamdani, not Andrew Cuomo, not Curtis Siwa, not Jesus Christ. No mayor is going to do that because we live in a capitalistic society, and we're not going to get landlords to stop charging those type of rent prices like we did see during the pandemic when they were trying to get people back in. So that's number one. Number two, the reason why young voters are going to the socialist is because of something that Bobbie said there in terms of the pie in the sky type stuff. But I would take umbrage with the word that she used, which is C's. It's not really about C's. There's a difference between socialism and communism and Marxism, and these terms get conflated. And as the son of a kid who left a communist country, I know what communism looks like when the government controls everything. Socialism, is not the exact same way. And so people are looking for a different type of change. They're looking for people to talk to them about the issues, not necessarily solve them. And we saw that in the 2024 elections, which is what's happening right now in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, which is the affordability crisis is still playing out in different cities. So I think for Democrats, the takeaway is keep talking about the issue, right? Maybe not solve it, but as long as you keep talking about it, because voters are creatures of the current moment, you will garner those votes. And that's what we saw in 2024 with Trump's rise. That's what we're seeing in 2025 play out as well.
And as we look at the messaging and the successes and failures of the different approaches, I know, Bobbie Anne, you fought Governor Hochul's move to institute future quarantine camps that had some concerning features of the potential for government overreach and control. What are your thoughts about how, say, the Republican Party can better talk to the public about socialism, the potential for overreach of the government, but also affordability at the same time?
Right. Well, this is the problem. The messaging is not getting through to the voters, or at least not to the vast majority of voters. You referenced my lawsuit against Governor Hochul for the quarantine camp regulation. It was absolutely not covered by mainstream media in New York or outside New York. It was something that flew under the radar, and it should not have. Being able to remove people from their home with no proof that you're sick and put you into a detention center for however long the government or the Department of Health wants, with no means for you to regain your freedom unless you hire an attorney and sue your way out, is absolutely unconscionable. And it was not covered by the media, and therefore it flew under the radar. And we see the same thing happening here. Yes, the Republicans have to change their messaging, but they need to do more messaging, and they need to explain to the voters what it means when somebody like Zohran Mamdani says, I'm going to make New York City more affordable. Now, the C's, the means of production, those are his words. Those are not my words. He actually said that that's what his plan is to do. He wants to close prisons. Again, his words, not my words. He wants to defund the police. He wants to legalize prostitution. He wants to, raise taxes by $9 billion with a B, billion dollars on the most wealthy New York City dwellers. Those are things that are, number one, not really explained to the majority of voters. What does that mean? That means you are going to see a mass exodus from New York City, which is going to cause the collapse of the economy. I mean, there was a poll that was just released yesterday that said that if Mamdani did win, that almost 1 million New York City residents would flee the city. And those that are planning to flee are the ones are in those top earning tax brackets. If you lose your base, you are going to see a tremendous collapse economically in the city. So these are things that, if we want to understand what's going on or what will go on under the reign of a mayor who, he's a self-proclaimed socialist, but when you look at his policies, they really are more communist than socialist, because he does want the government to control everything. And he even said that in his acceptance speech last night. There are no issues out there that are too small for the government not to deal with. That is absolutely not a capitalist mindset. That is a communist mindset, meaning he wants the government to control and step in any and all situations. And that's very scary because that will cause the collapse of New York City, which is, the financial center of our nation, if not the world. So this is a really serious situation here. It needs to be better explained to the citizenry. That's for sure, because I don't think that was done properly on this campaign.
Do you have a sense, Mike, that the youth today fully understand socialism, communism, and Marxism?
No, I mean, this panel is showing me that they don't, depending upon whatever age bracket, because again, his words in the mayoral debate, I don't want to defund the police. The current police budget has 33,700 police officers that are allocated for. I don't want to increase that. What I want to do is allocate that funding now to have mental health resources and other professionals go out on calls. Whether or not the calls or the severity and the dispatcher can handle it, we can get into all of that. But at the end of the day, look, if Republicans I worked at Fox News for 2.5 years. I know what talking points look like. I know what buzzwords look like. I know what phraseology looks like, for lack of a better term. I think if Republicans want to get serious, as opposed to labeling him 4 different terms that are conflating all 4 of them, I think what they should do is actually talk about the issue and the direct path line to solve it, and how Zohran is inexperienced to solve it. Cuomo tried to do that. The problem is Cuomo killed New York City residents with his policies, and he had a sexual harassment scandal on top of that. And then Curtis Sliwa, who I actually think the Republicans should have thrown more behind, because he's actually been a fixture in New York City for 45 years, whether or not the hat gives a connotation of he's not a serious candidate. They never actually put something serious into the Republican nominee for the party in New York City. So if the Republican Party wants to change, I would drop the buzzwords and phrases and the conflation of the terms that nobody wants to hear, and actually talk about the issues and give people a direct through line to how we solve those issues. That is the problem with American politics in 2025, because I just said it before. Zohran Mamdani, Andrew Cuomo, Curtis Sliwa, they're not going to make that 540 West 50th apartment come down from $5,700 to what I was paying at $3,300. They're not going to do it. And they're not going to do it because we live in a capitalistic society. Zohran Mamdani is not going to change that. Andrew Cuomo's not going to change that. Teddy Ruxpin, the old teddy bear, is not going to change that. The problem with New York City, and especially the mayor's race, it gets over magnified. Dinkins got hate. Koch on his 3rd term got hate. De Blasio got hate. Giuliani obviously has gotten hate post being America's mayor. Eric Adams was the face of the Democratic Party. Now you couldn't find him on a Democratic milk carton. So New York City's mayor's race gets over amplified, and that's the problem. If we truly want to talk about the issues and the direct through line to solve them, that's where Mamdani gave some clear-cut answers. The grocery store idea as an example, pilot program, 5 different boroughs. This is what we would do, and we would reallocate budget that is already being spent on private grocery stores for that. Whether or not you agree with that, that's fine. But he talked about the policy all the way through. And therein lies the solve. And that's why I think people went to the ballot box for him.
Certainly people will be watching to see how his promises pan out. And we just have about 30 seconds left. If you would like to give the final remark, Bobbie Anne Cox.
Yeah, I think that Mike has some good points there. This is really about, marketing, right? Zohran Mamdani marketed himself and his ideas in such a manner that he appealed to 50% of the voters, and he won. So it was also, I think, the manner in which he did his marketing. He's 34 years old, so he was able to use all of the technology that's modern and hip for the people that are in his age bracket, right? Those 20-year-olds, those 30-year-olds, even some 40-year-olds. He was on TikTok. He was all over social media. Those were things that were lacking, I think, in, the Cuomo and also the Curtis Sliwa campaigns. So, if you appeal to your voters and you can reach them more effectively, you have a much bigger shot at winning. So this is really something that was this whole race, this whole mayoral race was really something that came out in the end to show that, it's not just the issues, it's the personality of the candidate and how well they can sell what they're selling. to the voters. And, if the issues are not fully explained, as Mike said, if they're not fully explained to the voters and they're just kind of glazed over, I think the Republicans would have done better to give specific examples, or even Cuomo, who was running independently, give specific examples of what Mamdani's New York City would look like if he wins. And I think that was lacking. I think people relate to specific hard examples. What does it mean if you're going to shift the funding within the police department from, the cops on the street keeping you safe and stopping and preventing crimes to, doing a mental health, taking that money and putting it towards mental health experts instead? What does that look like for the everyday New Yorker? Those kinds of examples, I think, would have done a better job at showing that this is really a dangerous type of reign that we're going to see now for the next 4 years at least. We do have term limits in New York City for the mayor, but it's 3 consecutive terms. So, we're really going to have to see how this plays out.
Certainly, and I know President Trump convened his senators this morning, forecast that they would be speaking about and reflecting on the results last night. Both sides, I'm sure, will be reflecting for quite some time to come. Thank you so much, Bobbie Anne Cox, Mike Leon. Good to have you both on with us today.
Thanks, Steph.
Yes, thank you.